Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast, part of the Fans First Sports Network. Remember, take a second, throw us a subscription, and make sure you share this article if you would. We love for you, or this video, however you're processing it, or this audio that you're getting. Please just make sure you share it for us to get it out on all the platforms. We just want to take a really quick second. We are growing so fast and so exponentially with people watching and listening that it would not be fair nor germane of us to just stop and thank you, the viewers, the listeners, the readers, and all of it. You guys are awesome. Without you, we don't get the privilege of doing this. We don't take you for granted. We don't talk down to you in this podcast. We don't treat you like you're morons because you're fans, or we don't treat you morons because you don't do what we do for a living. We're going to be professional. You're not going to see us dropping F-bombs. We're going to bring you the best information, the quality information, but always delivered extremely respectfully because you guys deserve that. So I appreciate all of you. Every week I'm joined by one of my dear friends. I love this guy. We have been friends for a long time. And he is going to be starting his own podcast to be discussing Michigan State University and all that they do and all his success there. But he's a highly successful attorney in Atlanta, Georgia. He was a television news reporter, has been a sports writer for many years, and somewhere around 14 years, him and I have been doing radio and podcasts and everything together. He is the one and only, the great Johnny Shop. Johnny, good to have you. Congratulations for your podcast coming on the Fans First Sports Network. Good to have you, and it's good to talk to you.
Now, always fun. Looking forward to it again.
So we got, as usual, you and I always have some hot topics from around the NFL each week, how they relate to the Las Vegas Raiders. And because obviously if it involves the league, it involves the Raiders. There was a report that came out, and let me just say, an accurate report, that Tom Brady was in deep discussions to buy a chunk of the Las Vegas Raiders. As you can imagine, Raider Nation hates the Patriots. They don't dislike them, they hate them. I can understand that rivalry. And because I'm from the state of Michigan, Michigan State, Michigan. But I also know a guy who was the most devoted fan of Michigan State I've ever met. And you know him, Steve Rothwell, who, when he was battling and fighting cancer, and they said, you got to go to University of Michigan Hospital. Okay, even though he was a Spartan, and the doctors and all the nurses at U of M with their Block M shirts and gowns and scrubs were so awesome to him. In fact, one of them even got him a Michigan State shirt to wear when he was there. I understand rivalry, but sometimes, John, I don't understand if stuff makes you better. That's why Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels have almost been behind the eight ball since the beginning here, just because of fans. Give me your thoughts and analysis of, I think it would be a good thing for the franchise. I know that's going to get me so much hate mail. I probably shouldn't say it, but I'm not going to lie to fans. I think it'll be good for fans. Your thoughts?
Well, when you look at it first from a business perspective, Tom Brady has some money to invest. If you're looking at where do you put your money, first of all, it's nearly impossible to be allowed or have the privilege to put your money in the NFL operation. From a business perspective for Tom Brady, it makes a ton of sense. From the franchise perspective, you're talking about one of the name brand franchises in the history of the sport. So business-wise, makes a lot of sense for him. I think it makes a lot of sense for the Raiders to consider for a couple of reasons. Just look at Tom Brady's work history, not his success, but his work history. He's been in some interesting organizations. He goes to the University of Michigan. The staff that recruited him is fired. He has to make a decision. Do I stay or do I go? He's probably talked into staying. He doesn't play as much as he should have. His team may have won more had he played more. So he takes some things and learns them there. Then, of course, he's off to the Patriots, and all of a sudden he's thrust into the starting role just to get the ball rolling, if you will, as Drew Bledsoe's out, and on his career goes. So if you're looking at a work history, you've got a guy with a couple decades of experience in the NFL, and he can identify different things that organizations have done and have not done that have helped separate them. it's not just the Patriot way. Obviously, he spent a little time in Tampa Bay, maybe had a little more influence in some ways in Tampa Bay, but he got to see really over the course of a career, talking with dozens and dozens and dozens of players, probably in depth that would never come out publicly, what works, what doesn't, maybe what held this franchise back, what put this franchise forward. So you're talking about a guy who just come off that long of a career with that many experiences with organizations, who's got some knowledge behind there. So it's not as if he would be coming in and calling the shots, but you're looking for a sounding board that has a real serious track record of success in the NFL. What better operation, what better asset could you add if you're the Raiders? Plus, potentially you've got some cash infusion. I don't know how big a difference that makes or doesn't make. And from a fan perspective, the Raiders know that the initial backlash to such a move is going to be the worst part. There's going to be an initial backlash. There'll be some rub. You've got like super fans like Tiger Woods that'll give a little jab here and a jab there. All that stuff will be over. All that stuff will be over come September if it does happen. So I think it makes sense for both sides. I think the Raiders have more to gain than meets the eye. It's not just money, and I don't buy any of this. Well, he'd be a passive owner. Let's see what happens. There's some knowledge that this guy has. Again, putting his success aside, just from his experience in being in different organizations that operated at the top of the sport on a regular basis, just like any business or any place you work, there's some good things, some bad things. You go to another place, you're like, boy, if this place maybe considered doing this and that, it would take off. I think that's what Tom Brady sees with the Las Vegas Raiders.
You know, John, I want to go back. I respect and understand fans who hate the Patriots. It's sports. They're fanatics. It's where we get the name fan. But you got a chance to add the greatest football player, the quarterback for sure of all time in the National Football League. And you're an organization that says we're about just winning. And everywhere he's gone, he's just won. I understand you don't like the Tuck rule. I understand you don't like Bob Kraft. You don't like the Patriots. But you get a chance to add that guy to your organization. And I think it makes a whole different world. I'll give you another one. You know, Irvin, Irvin. But Irvin, there was reports that he was interested, and he was, in potentially buying part of the team. When you get to add those type of guys, who are winners, these guys are not guys who are going to spend their life worrying about, geez, oh, Pete, so how much is the popcorn? They're going to worry about, why are we not winning? What's going on? And I think Mark Davis, before he would sell a team, part of the team, needs to understand, I think, what he would be getting in Tom Brady. But I don't see any negative for the Raider Nation. I only see positive, other than if you're such a blind hater of the Patriots that you just don't want them. I get that. I understand. Don't think those people who feel that way are bad. But, man, I don't think that's a case at all for this.
Now, let me say something about Magic, too, because Magic has professional ownership success. Magic got involved with the Dodgers, who are kind of a sleeping giant, and they have taken off. And there is a lot that he's learned in that process, regardless of how active he's been. He has a really good idea of what works and what doesn't. And my understanding is part of the reason he had such an interest in the Commanders, and I guess some in the Raiders, is because he saw the same kind of thing. He sees currently the Commanders, who hopefully will one day be the Red Tails, as a sleeping giant franchise that is set to take off in many different ways. So when you add somebody that has that experience from an ownership standpoint into the mix, it's only a good thing. And look, Tom Brady is a smart guy. I do not have any doubt that it's not going to take him long to get up to speed wherever he dips his toe in the water. Some franchise is going to get him as an asset at a starting point at a relatively low level, but I think they're going to get a whole lot out of it. And I would look for this I hope it moves quicker. I hope it moves faster than slower, because it's really good for everybody, especially the Raiders. Good for the Raiders more than anything else, but of course it's great for the sport.
Agreed. All right, we've got three topics we're covering today, and they're all Raider specific. The first was Tom Brady. The second is Brian Hoyer. Now, and I've told this to the fans because I'm not gonna try to hoodwink them. In the interest of full disclosure, Brian is a friend of mine. I love Brian dearly. I love his family dearly. They're precious people. His brothers, his sister, his grandmother, Oma, man, really love her. His mom and dad, him, his beautiful bride, his kids, love them. Great people. And I think that Brian Hoyer was a very good signing for the Raiders. Do I think he's a starting quarterback? Not at all. I don't think that's where he is year 15 in his career. But I think he brings some stuff to the Raiders that's going to surprise some people. And it may not show on the field where people see it, but it's huge for the franchise. Break down what you think of Brian Hoyer being a Raider.
Well, I know of Brian Hoyer well as you for a long, long time. First of all, it's a guy that came with a big time fastball, serious baseball pitcher as he gets into college. He goes to Michigan State, gets into quite a mix of coaching changes. But when Mark D'Antonio took over Michigan State, one of the reasons Brian Hoyer won that starting job and had success there was because of what he did before the snap. And keeping that in the back of the mind, I think that's how this guy has stuck for so long, besides an incredible love for the sport. So Hoyer is an undrafted free agent with the New England Patriots, somehow makes the team in many years where they only kept him as the sole backup, and has been a pro's pro. When he's had a chance to start, incredible, unfortunately, broken arm injury, a major knee injury, still comes back. The guy loves the game. And now he's coming across the country, really, in what I see as a hybrid role for the Raiders. He is going to bring an intangible value as a coach, really, honestly, as kind of a player coach in many, many ways. A lot of what he's going to do is lead by example because he's been a professional quarterback for so long now, way more than a decade, a handful of franchises. People have, it looks like, begged him to come back from time to time. So here he is with the Raiders, who've got Aiden O'Connell. You could not probably ask for a better position to be a rookie quarterback than have somebody to learn from like Brian Hoyer. And I think he's a guy that has an effect on a locker room. It's not necessarily rah-rah, but it's pretty consistent. So what we see here, I believe, is maybe the second or third incarnation of kind of a hybrid, a guy that is brought in by a team at the quarterback position to kind of help coach and see things and mold. You know, the guy he followed at Michigan State was Drew Stanton, who arguably was the most recent one of those hybrid type guys. We saw him at Indianapolis, Cleveland, Arizona, Tampa Bay, doing a lot of things that were not on the field as a starting quarterback. There's a reason that those kind of guys contribute to teams and are brought to teams. There's a reason that he was brought to Las Vegas. And I don't think it's something that's going to show up on the stat sheet like you laid out, but it may show up in some development, especially when you consider the young Aiden O'Connell.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, I know Bill Belichick wanted him to get into coaching. And I think as long as you keep him as where he is, I think he's great for Jimmy Garoppolo. I think he's great for Aiden O'Connell. And I think he's going to be great for the organization. He's not a guy, there'll be zero trouble with him. He's a guy that's going to be helping young players learn stuff. He's going to be Josh McDaniels in training camp and OTAs on the field. I just think it's a no-brainer. I want to add this because we always throw some extra points in when we do our three. If Jimmy Garoppolo can stay healthy, I think it's an upgrade from Derek Carr. But his track record is he doesn't stay healthy. And I recently did an article that there's no bigger gamblers in Las Vegas than the Raiders because they just gambled 70 million on a guy that's injured all the time. To me, again, everybody loves Jimmy Garoppolo, the teammate. They do. They love him. Everybody loves the way Jimmy Garoppolo plays when he's healthy. The guy's a winner. Man, he's a winner. Everywhere he goes, he wins. The only condition with him is off the field, character-wise, great character guy. But if you can't stay healthy, the best ability is availability. And I want to ask you this about Jimmy Garoppolo. If he stays healthy, I think all the credit in the world's got to go to Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels. You rolled the dice. You were coming into year 2 under a huge amount of criticism for year 1 because the fans hate the Patriots. They just almost universally, not all, but almost universally hate you guys. They rolled the dice. To me, this was a gutsy move by Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler. And man, if he stays healthy, and they believe he will, they believe they've identified some things that'll help him. This was a huge risk, but a huge reward for them, wasn't it, John?
Yeah, I mean, it really was a bit of a gamble, as you mentioned. There are some guys that seem to be injury prone. And right now, Garoppolo is one injury away from that. You know, there's a guy that had a humongous amount of hype and success very early in his career in Philadelphia, who became extraordinarily injury prone. I think that hurt his game, hurt his development. And as of this date, I don't think Carson Wentz is in the NFL. So that's one extreme. Garoppolo is a guy that looks durable. You look at him, you think this guy's got to be durable. I don't know that the systems he played in put him in a position to be injured, but we do know this. He knows the system he's in now, which has a decent track record of protecting quarterbacks' health. Obviously, he's got a familiar face and mind to work with there in Brian Hoyer and within that room. So it really is just a question of durability. The nice thing for the Raiders offense that I see this year is if they just play their game, if they play within themselves, and especially with Jimmy G, if he plays within himself, he's going to be a productive starting NFL quarterback. That's it. Mm-hmm. So you do identify the big if, which is health. Is he going to start and complete the entire schedule? We don't know. Short substitution. On paper, Brian Hoyer is there to come in and fill in a spot. This whole thing does potentially blow up. The gamble goes boom if there's another major injury. But you're playing the odds a little bit, thinking these injuries that have happened to Jimmy Garoppolo, at some point it's got to even out. And we don't think he's going to be as injured in the coming 2 or 3 years because look, looking forward in the NFL is a short looking glass. They know that. I think it was a gamble worth taking, and it's going to be one that we'll find out a good bit about before the end of October 1st.
All right. So I want to get into the first 4 games of the Raiders season. We're going to do this first 4, second 4, third 4, and then in the 4th week, we'll talk about the last 5 because there's obviously 17 games. I think the Raiders, my prediction on the year, and as you know, I've done this for decades. You've done it with me. I give a ceiling. I give a floor. I think the ceiling on this team is 9 and 8. Excuse me. I think the floor on this team is 7 and I put them at 7 and 10. But I think they're going to get to 9 wins because as you know, I don't predict injuries. So if Jimmy Garoppolo stays healthy, I think they go 9 and 7. I think they start 1 and 3. So we're going to go through these 4 games because I think you and I disagree a little bit. I think you're saying we got to know what the Raiders are by October 1st. I think they're going to be 1 and 3 and still finish 9 and 7. So the first game is they go to Denver on September 10th. I think they lose there. Then they go to Buffalo on the 17th. I think they lose there. Then on the 24th, they host on Sunday Night Football the Steelmen. I think they get a win there. And then on the 1st, they go to the LA Chargers, where I think they lose. I think they start 1 and 3. Again, I've said 7 to 9 wins. I'm predicting 9. Your thoughts on my analysis?
What I see for the Raiders schedule is you're going to find out what you're working with by the end of October 1st. The first thing I look at is competitiveness. How competitive are those games? You've got, I believe, a sitting duck in Denver. You've got a serious best-in-class challenge with Buffalo. You've got a pretty close to best-in-class challenge with the Chargers, and you've got the Steelers. So I'm not sure the record is going to be great. I would think it's probably going to be 2-2, but that's just because in the NFL, everything seems to squeeze towards that number. But I think you're going to have an idea of what you've got competitive-wise. Here's what I mean. If the Raiders get flat blown out of a couple of these games, somebody's going to get their hand and start getting ready to push the fire alarm. If they are very close in all the games and somewhere around 2-2, well, all of a sudden, maybe you've got a chance to put a good season together and get stronger through the year. So the most interesting thing to me of those first 4 games is how competitive they are, because they've got 2 really good teams that they're going to play.
How funny is it to you that here are the Raiders coming off a bad 2022 and they still get 6 primetime games? I mean, the NFL understands the power of the brand known as the Raiders.
It does. And look, the brand is more exciting and better in Las Vegas because it just feels a little more permanent. Look, there's nothing like the Oakland Raiders. There never will be. But as soon as that thing moved and came back to a nearly dilapidated stadium, it started to lose some luster. There's a lot of luster right now for the Raiders. And as soon as they get back in a consistent winning mode, they're going to be featured more and more on these national games because people just tend to tune in.
Yeah, I agree with you. So I want to talk about those 4 games. Sean Payton is an interesting guy to me, John. I think he's a very good coach. I don't think he's a Bill Parcells Hall of Fame guy, but I think he's a very good coach. I think, if he can go and win and improve the Broncos, get them some AFC West titles, unseat the Chiefs, I think he can move into that great role. But I do think he's a very good coach. I like him personally. I like him as a coach. Russell Wilson, I love the guy. I love him as a person, a quarterback, but he isn't the Russell Wilson of old. I said last year, there was a lot of angst this time last year in Raider Nation. I said, guys, if you were even watching him before his injury, he isn't the old Russell Wilson. So this isn't disrespecting him. I think he's a great guy, but he's not who he used to be. Now, luckily for them, last year they had the 2nd worst coach in the National Football League. And that was just so stupid to watch. It was almost as bad as watching the coach of the Chargers. But they go out and they get a Sean Payton who I think's going to put him in positions to succeed. Sean Payton's not going to be calling plays that Russell Wilson can't do anymore. So I think they're going to be better, but it's not like I think Sean Payton is the greatest coach in the history of the NFL or where Russell Wilson is today. What do you think of that analysis of the Broncos?
I think it's a lot closer to 2025 than it is 2015 with Wilson. You're more optimistic on Russell Wilson than I am. I'm not sure that football is a top 3 priority for him at this time. He looked horrific last year in a badly coached team. It was very early in the year. We saw a very special timeout called by Denver that pretty much told you, okay, this is probably not going to last too long. And you saw defense get frustrated. If Russell Wilson is very productive again, I will be surprised, and I will tip my hat to him and give all the credit in the world to he and Sean Payton. I don't know what Sean Payton's doing going back to take Russell Wilson in 2023 when there were maybe other opportunities in the NFL to work with a younger quarterback or wait another year. I think this is a big roll of the dice by Sean Payton. I think it's a bigger roll of the dice than the Raiders going with Jimmy Garoppolo, to be honest with you. I'm not optimistic on the Broncos. I think they're a sitting duck, really. I think they are a sitting duck for the Raiders to go get right out of the gate. And for me, the Broncos' start to their season is way more important than most. They all matter a ton in the NFL. There's only 17 games, but I think the Broncos are in some trouble, and I do not expect much out of Russell Wilson at all. I think it is past prime, and I don't know that they're going to find productive answers.
Then you go week 2, which is a game I think you and I are just in total lockstep on.
Yeah.
You go to Buffalo. I think they're one of the elite teams. They're one of my teams that I have as a true contender. Would not be shocked if they won and played in or won a Super Bowl. Heading all the way to the East Coast from the Pacific time zone. I listen, do I think the Raiders can be competitive? Yeah, if you define competitive for me, but that is the position of a franchise in such a better place. I just don't see the Raiders having a shot there. And to be honest, I don't know of any of the other 31 teams in the NFL heading into Buffalo week 2 that I would predict to win. So this is not a slam on the Raiders. I think it's just speaking about how highly I respect the Bills.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be very, very difficult. They're not going to be expected to win. At the same measure, the next week hosting Pittsburgh on Sunday Night Football, I would give the edge and expect the edge to the Raiders on that one because the environment is going to be fantastic. It's, it's just more likely than not a home team's going to win that game, meaning if it was in Pittsburgh, I'd probably take it the other way. We don't know what we're going to get from the Steelers, but after a week or two, I don't know for sure if we're really going to know because obviously they've got a pretty young quarterback and we don't know exactly what that's going to produce quite yet.
All right. So going to the Steelmen, I mean, the Raiders should have won that game last year. If Josh McDaniels and Derek Carr were on the same page, I think they would have. I think that we'll just leave it there. I think they win that Sunday Night Football game. Now they're 1-2, and then let's get to the Bolts.
Yep.
To me, their coach is the worst coach in the National Football League. Had Sean Payton taken the Bolts job, which I know there was a lot of people in the National Football League because I talked to people who work for other teams, work for the Raiders, and work for the league, that thought this is a perfect spot for Sean Payton. I would instantly be saying, I think the Chargers are a legitimate team. I think they've got a legitimate shot. I would have them up probably in my top 8 teams in the National Football League. Instead, they keep the guy they got who just I got nothing, John. To me, you can't have your coach that you go into every year knowing he's going to cost me 1, if not 2 games, and I want to be competitive in the National Football League.
Well, it's a tricky spot because NFL head coaching is not usually a learn on the job situation. They've made some changes, obviously, on the defensive side, but I'm kind of there with you in that I thought it would be a perfect spot for Sean Payton because the upside for the Chargers is huge. I'm one of the guys that thinks that they can absolutely compete for a Super Bowl, thought they would compete for a Super Bowl as recently as last year. So I think that's a tough game for the Raiders. If the Chargers are playing well, that is a really tough one. And again, my interest is how competitive are they in those first 4 games, regardless of the record? If it's 1-3, 2-2, or somehow 3-1, how competitive are they? If they get blown out if they get blown out of a game, it's a little bit of an eye opener. If they somehow get blown out of more than one game, you got a real issue.
I was asked by a fan the other night, John, what record in the first 4 games would you say push the panic button? And I said 0-4.
Yeah.
If they're 0-4, you hit the panic button. I think they're 1-3, going to finish with 9 wins. But if they're 4-0, 3-1, 2-1, 1-3, I think you're fine. 0-4, I think it's push the panic button. You think that's pretty fair?
I do.
All right. I'm Hondo Carpenter with Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast, part of the Fans First Sports Network. This is Johnny Shop, great attorney from the state of Georgia down in Atlanta, launching his own podcast on the Fans First Sports Network, talking Michigan State here in a couple of weeks. We appreciate you, Johnny, each and every week for joining us. And to you, the listeners, however you're doing this, if you're watching it video-wise, if you're hearing it, if you're reading the article that goes with it, take a second, drop a share, make sure you're following us, keep up what's going on. But we appreciate you. Thank you for your time as well. Thanks, Johnny.